Welcome to Created by Design. I hope you all have been well and busy working on whatever projects you work on. As you well know by now, mine is mostly knitting, but I do venture into making some sourdough, which can be makes me go down a bunny trail looking at all the videos on YouTube of all the many different ways of making sourdough. And I have friends that have started making sourdough bread, and so that's been kind of an interesting journey along with my knitting. And then of course it's nice weather here in Oregon, and so I've been out in my little back patio, and maybe I'll post a few little pictures of our small little patio in our backyard. We downsized a number of years ago, and have enjoyed every minute of having downsized. And one of the prerequisites was I wanted not a lot of yard. I'm used to big yards, and I just was ready for a smaller yard, and so we have a smaller yard. And so I might post a few pictures of our backyard. But I want to get you just kind of updated on some of my projects. I am not making any of the little critters at this point in time. The last little one, what was the last little one that I made? Oh, well, we know. It was the sloth. And I didn't bring him into this room, but if you can kind of see around over here, I have made probably about 27 of them, I think now. And a few of them are living in some other homes at this point in time. But so I'm thinking about my next one though, but I haven't started it yet. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be. I have some ideas though. I always have to have an idea kind of twirling in the back of my brain as to what is my next project going to be. But right now, I actually have 3 major projects going. Since we talked last time, I have started a sweater for myself. I had some of this really wonderful cashmere yarn that I had purchased for another sweater, and I actually ended up over purchasing for that sweater. And so I bought a little bit more so I'd have enough to make a second sweater. So this is wonderful. It's from Mongolia, and from some of the local farms there. And this is through a co-op. Quite a long little story when you go on and Google about it. There's quite a bit of how to process or get the yarn from Mongolia, where they have the cashmere goats, and this is really wonderful yarn. And when you knit with it, they also sell you, this is a spool of it's really nylon. And because the cashmere is so soft that for like a sweater, if you didn't use this, it's really fine nylon with it, it would really just stretch, and a sweater or a garment wouldn't hold its shape. Now for a scarf, of course, you wouldn't have to use this, but this is part of just what you pay for. And it's dyed to match exactly the same color of the yarn, so you're working with 2 spools at one time, and it really works out pretty easy. But the sweater that I chose, this is kind of an interesting story. Nothing comes just quite easy for me sometimes, but I found this pattern. I'll hold it up close so you can see the name. It's on this side right there. And it's ANDO. And actually it's a Brooklyn tweed pattern. And I just love it. It's just an easy flowing sweater, doesn't have a lot of shape, looks very comfortable, and actually has quite an interesting way of putting it together. So this panel down here I already have made, And then this is this is the sleeve over here. And then this part right here is the front, and it goes up over the shoulder, and right here, this part here in the back actually would come from the neck kind of down in between the shoulder blades, and is sewn together, so it would be kind of a V shape right there. So very interesting way of putting this pattern together. But what I discovered, the design on this sweater, and I doubt, yeah, it's not going to show up very much, but I did about 11 inches of the front panel where that design starts, and the design just melted away into the yarn. It could not hold its structure because this yarn is so soft. And actually it was a single cable, and it was staggered every 6 row, alternating. So it was just, you know, like one here and one here, one here, and all the way through the whole front and up over the shoulders. But it was just going away, and it looked kind of like an odd bump in the yarn. The pattern itself did not show up. So I took that 11 inches all out, and I played with several other pattern designs on this yarn, and I ended up with what actually I'm really liking. This has more structure to it, and it doesn't just melt into the fabric, so it has a little bit of a eyelet hole, but it's in kind of a stripe effect, and I think that I'm going to really like it. But it was kind of interesting. I've never had that happen to me with a yarn before in the pattern that I chose. So if this yarn had just had more structure to it, a tighter twist to it, for instance, that other pattern would have looked just fine. And when I looked up on the pattern for what material it calls for, and of course this page that I picked up doesn't say the material, but it was a Brooklyn tweed loft, and it definitely has more structure to it. So I'm just sharing all of that with you. Sometimes we see a pattern, but the stitch and the yarn don't match up. And so it's important to think about that or experiment with it. I had to be okay to change up. And if I really love the sweater, well, maybe I'll make it one day out of another yarn that lets this design show up. So we'll see if I'm into doing another sweater after I get this one done. But I just wanted to share that with you because those are just some things sometimes we don't stop to think about. And I've certainly have knitted quite a bit, but that one even caught me off guard. I just didn't really think that single cable would disappear, just kind of melted into the yarn. It just faded away and looked like a tiny little lump there rather than having any structure to it at all. So learn from my learning experience. Don't be afraid to change up. You know, we have to be flexible. So that's one of my projects that I have been working on. I have several sitting here. I'm also on this particular video going to do another update from Smaland Farms and show you what's happening in Carrie's backyard. Things are really growing fast right now, and it's a good growing season here in Oregon. So one of the other projects that I work on all year long is I make hats and things to give to some shelter in the around Christmas time. And in the past, I've always chosen a women's shelter, and I will probably do that again this year. But as I make things, I just have a bin. I'll pick it up here. and kind of show you some of the things. You've already seen some of my slipper socks. These are super heavy, out of a washable wool. That's really important when you're making projects like this. You want to make it out of a yarn that is easy to manage, that's machine washable, because especially in a shelter, you know, getting things washed, let alone you know, you're not going to be able to lay things out to dry by hand. So I have a couple of pairs of socks, another pair of the slipper socks, and like I say, you've seen some of these in the past. Have a child's hat that I've done here. This also is all washable. And we're going to talk a little bit about hats. I know that hats seem to be something that's always in high demand. And someone said to me the other day, well, you can just go down to the dollar store and buy all kinds of hats. And, you know, you can, and I don't mean to just totally knock that idea, because if you're cold and you need a hat, you don't care where it came from. But I also am kind of the idea that I want it to be something a little special. I don't just want to say, oh, it's just the homeless or it's just the needy, so we'll go down and give them second best. I want them to receive, when we can, something that would make them feel special. And I'm actually looking into giving this year to foster teenagers. It's my understanding that there's such a need in the foster systems, which is kind of sad, here in the United States, and kind of a forgotten group of kids. And so I think some of my product will go to that here in this area that I live in. But I've made several hats, and here's one of the hats. It's just a traditional ribbed hat, which is probably what teenagers are going to like the most, is, you know, nothing too, you know, cutesy or fancy. This is a good way of using up leftover yarn, by the way, is mix it up. I am going to put a pom-pom on this hat here. It's a two-toned hat, pretty simple, it's soft. And then I've got a couple more hats here that I've put pom-poms on. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the edge of a hat. I know in times past, I've just done a long-tail cast, long-tail cast on the needle for the stitches to start out. And of course, if you've knitted a hat before, you know that most of the time you're starting at the brim edge. And then I've gone to actually crocheting my cast on. I like that better than the long tail. What I don't like about long tail is it seems to be a little restricting, and you don't get, the spring in the edge of the cap that one should. And you can kind of, stretch it out a bit, but when you've reached the max of the stretch. And so lately I have been doing what's called the tubular cast on. And both of these hats, this gray one here, this is a tubular cast on, and this one is a tubular cast on. And honestly, I don't know that I will ever make a hat again that doesn't use the tubular cast on. And you can take any hat pattern and do the tubular cast on. So any pattern that you have, you can do the tubular. I would really encourage you to go to YouTube, YouTube, type in tubular cast on. And there are several ways to do tubular cast on. Nothing is ever always just one way. Wouldn't that make it easy? But the one that I have found, and I thought about demonstrating it, and I thought, well, these YouTubes are so good. Pink Knitter or Pink Knitting, can't quite remember her name. She has an excellent YouTube on doing the tubular cast on. And it's with a crochet hook, and on you put your stitches on, and she'll tell you how many stitches for what you need. And it's with doing a couple of rows, including a yarn over, and then knitting a row. It's not difficult. By about the third or fourth row, this whole rolled edge, that's what's so nice about the tubular cast on, is it's stretchy, but it's just a nice rolled edge here. There's no hard cast on edge. This one shows it really well too, and that for a hat is going to make it comfortable to wear, gives it the stretch at the edge that you need, and it just has such a nice finished look. So you never have to worry about, oh, if I cast on my stitches too tight for the the circumference of a person's head. So that's I just wanted to encourage you, if you're making hats, one of the downfalls that I hear about and complaint is, oh, my edge of the hat is just too tight, my cast on edge. And that's the way to solve the problem. So if you've not looked into that tubular cast on, do it. I encourage you to do that. One of the other projects that I'm working on that will also be for the foster probably program is I'm knitting some fun, just got this one started with my Flexi Flip needles, and this will actually be a headband. But once again, I am using some bright colors. Once again, I am using a washable wool in this case. I don't really like working with acrylic. I know it's inexpensive. The washable wool isn't that much more expensive, but you just end up with a nicer product. I was talking to somebody the other day that had started a project with acrylic yarn, and they knitted on it for quite a little ways, and they were so disappointed with it. It was already pelling up just in the knitting of the product, and it wasn't holding its shape. And so she got really discouraged with it and actually stopped the project, wasn't going to finish, wasn't going to use the yarn. So, it's, if you can, watch for sales if you need to, in order to buy something like a washable wool if you're going to make something to give somebody. Just helps our product be a little bit nicer, and the person that's going to receive it is going to appreciate. They may never know that it could have been made out of acrylic and pell up bad. And I think there probably are some acrylics out there that might be better than others, but I just would really look at it closely. I think often we are tempted to, this is so inexpensive, I can make a lot of hats out of something or other, but if it's not very good quality and falls apart, you've put all the time into it. It's just kind of a shame to do that. And there are so many nice yarns available, and yet you don't have to go buy $30 skein yarns, and they are out there, of course, and they're beautiful yarns, but depending upon what you're using it for, I would just look at the quality of what you're choosing to work with. And then the last project, I'm going to give you an update on, and honestly I've not gotten very far with it, is my throw that I'm knitting in the round. And this is, of course, all wool, and it's Jamieson and Smith. It will be laying flat. If you're new and haven't watched any of my videos, it is going to be flat. I'm knitting it in the round. It's made with a steek, and I'll get the steek out here so you can see it. It's right here. You can see where the colors all change right here. That'll be cut open so that this will all lay flat. But this is wool, and I've just have set it aside. I just felt like doing some little short projects, and I'll be getting back to this very soon and hope to have it done by this fall, of course. But I just have to have several things going on or I get bored. I don't want to just sit day after day and just work on one project. And I think, look for ways to make your knitting or crochet or whatever other needlework you might do. Look for ways to keep it alive. And for me, that several things. Number one, having several projects to work on works for me. I realize that does not work for everybody. So if it doesn't work for you, then don't do that. The other thing that keeps my interest in what I'm doing is knowing what I'm doing it for. Having a goal, like I know that this throw that I'm working on will stay at my house and someday maybe at one of my grandkids' houses. Now when they hear that, they might say, "Oh no, Grandma." Too bad. Go get it maybe someday. So having a goal of what purpose is there in what I'm making. I now am on the search for finding the foster group that I want to give to here in our local area. I've been making a number of phone calls, so I know that's going to happen. Having the woman's rehab facility that I give, so I know what projects I'm making that will go there. So it just puts a little more a part of me to connect with what I'm doing. So it's not just senseless knitting without a purpose. I guess that's the piece that's important, is having a purpose about what I'm doing. So if you're kind of bored with what you're doing and you don't feel like you're feeling fulfilled, I think maybe finding a worthy cause that has a need, that has a want. Find out what their want is. Maybe you don't do any handwork at all. Maybe you are a baker or a gardener. You can go and do things for people. Or my daughter that's growing flowers, her heart desire is to begin to have enough flowers and bouquets to take and share with people, and share with people maybe that are in retirement homes or care centers. And I think when you connect with somebody else's need, it makes you feel more fulfilled with what you're doing. And I just think that's so good. And it's a way for us to just feel positive about what we're doing, and knowing that we're putting interest in somebody else, not just being absorbed about ourselves. So that's just my little share today. And I hope that encourages you to think maybe outside the box sometimes. And sometimes it requires us to meet new people, talk to strangers. After COVID, we've been kind of so shut in, and it's like, going out and meeting new people is almost like a lost art that we used to have and didn't even think twice about it. And now we stop and think, oh, well, are people ready to stop and talk to me? Make that connection. But I think it's time that we find a way to reach out beyond ourselves. And it could be somebody that's even, in your neighborhood. But I think any time that we look at other people's needs, it brings value to ourselves of knowing that you've helped somebody that really, really appreciated what you're doing. So that's my encouragement. I'm going to now say goodbye for this part of the video, and I'm going to insert a little catch up on Smaland Farms. And until next time, happy knitting and just bless every one of you. I still get questions about the knitted critters that we've been working on, the knitted wild animals. I think that's terrific. For anybody that has had questions, I've tried to help. I hope I've been helpful. And by next video, I will be having a new one started. So bye now, and do enjoy Smaland Farms. Bye now.
Hi, this is Carrie from Smaland Farm. Doing a quick update. It's May the 9th, and I have had a long afternoon of various projects, but I'm currently in the garden, and I thought I would give you a quick update on what's happening here. If you've been following some of the previous videos, you have seen the progression of the ranunculus, and we have lots of buds and blooms starting to happen. Really exciting. I do know, so this first bed here is supposed to be all like a salmon color, which is here, but we have a stray orange corm that got into this mix, so that's fine. But what I've learned is that I can plant a lot closer together. So I had some corms that did not germinate, and that's created some of the empty spot. And I also left some space in between. So this next year I will plant them closer together, and I will also pre-sprout the corms. But here are the orange. This has been open for a few days, but it's super, super cool. This is what it looks like when they are just starting to open. And what you want to do before you pick them is you want to squeeze them. And if they feel like a marshmallow, like when you would squeeze a marshmallow, that's when you know it's okay to pick. But I love how bright they are. They're just awesome. And then, of course, lots of yellow. And I love the white corm. So when I ordered, I didn't order any white, but you know, stuff happens on the farms, and they got a white mixed in. But look at how pretty these are. They're real tight when they start to open up, and then they just continue to open. And then look at this plant. There's, I don't know, 5 blooms on one plant. So I will be starting to cut some of these flowers, sharing with some family, and hopefully more will come back. Look at this one. Really, really cool. I love these flowers. They're really awesome. So I broke down and I bought bird netting for some of the food beds that I have. These happen to be strawberries, but we just cannot get on top of squirrels and birds, and I just decided that where food was going to be tender and desirable for these little critters, I am going to cover everything up so that we don't lose all of our effort. So that's what's happening there. The nice thing about this bird netting is nothing can get in, but I can still water through it. So when it rains, the rain goes through, and I have found that to be very helpful. So I don't have to remove it every time I go to water. So that's been great. Here are my stock plants. They are starting to grow. And then these 2 plants here, these are called Auric. I've never grown these. Love the color, and can't wait to see what they look like. In a previous video, I was showing this bed. This is Cerinthe, or I believe they call it honeywort, and they've really started to bloom out or branch out a little bit with more going on. So I can't wait to see what this ultimately looks like. It'll get tall, and the Cerinthe has really, really cool purple flowers that grow. So excited for this bed. Okay, so this is my big project in the garden for today. This is my dahlia row, and at the very, very end, you'll see some things planted. Those are some sunflowers, yellow sunflower as well as a purple sunflower. And then I've got a mess of garden fabric that will ultimately get stretched out over this grass and become a walkway just like this is. What I've done tonight is I've gone through and I've taken my garden fork and I've worked up the soil again, and I'm going to use this bed for my dahlias, and I'm going to show you the 2 different groups that I'm going to be working with. In these bins, you'll see tubers, and I've shown these in a previous video, but we've got some different tubers. These are all things that I overwintered from last year. My first time overwintering dahlias. Not everything made it, but this is the group that I felt like I had viable eyes. And here's a quick look at one of my mini greenhouses and some of my seed starts that will be going out in the garden. These are snapdragons, zinnias, and some more snapdragons doing really well. My sister actually did some seed starts for me of marigold. So that's what I have going on here. And then if you've seen some of the previous videos, you saw the tomato starts that oh gosh, I can't even remember when I started them at this point, but they're doing really, really well. Super excited. I have lots of tomatoes, way more than what I will put in my garden, although I've changed my plan, and I probably am going to plant around 20 tomato plants, which seems like an awful lot, but we want to do some canning, so we'll see how that goes. But they're really, really doing well. Very pleased. I have never started tomatoes from seed, so I would say so far we've got success. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I do to plant these. This is an example, actually. This particular tuber is called Sweet Natalie, and you can see that there are 3 different eyes. So I technically could separate this into 3 different tubers and grow 3 different plants, but I have plenty of tubers, so I'm going to go ahead and plant this all together, and hopefully I'll get a ton of blooms. And then at the end of the season, if I decide when I dig this up to separate it at that time, you know, hopefully I'll have even more tubers to work with. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to go about planting these. So I've got my hole started, and I'm going to go down probably about 6 to 9 inches in the ground, and then I'm going to, it's probably about 6 inches, I'm going to put my tuber down, and this one I'll just nestled there, but you want the eyes facing up. And then I'm going to come in, and I'm going to make sure that I get some of this good garden compost that I've put in with my native soil on top of here, so that mixes in, and it's loose on top. It will ultimately get water and hopefully do really well in this spot. So that's what I do to plant. And then because I know the name of this particular tuber, I happen to have a tag, and I'm going to set the tag so that as it grows and blooms, I know what dahlia that I'm working with. With those that I started from seed, obviously I don't have tags for those. I have no idea what they're going to even look like. So that's what I'm doing here. And once you put the tuber in the ground, you really do not give it any water. Obviously, if it rains out, it's gonna get a little bit of natural water, but I'm not going to purposefully water these tubers until the green is out of the ground. And then once you see green sprouting from the ground, that's the sign that you start to give the tubers some water and start your watering program. In this particular bed, because of the width of it, I am going to plant 3 in a row and then all the way down. And they're going to be about 9 inches apart all the way down, across and then down. So I should be able to get, I don't know, a lot of tubers in here. We'll see if I get, all of them, including my seedlings. So there you have it. And then as these things poke out from the ground, I will show the progress. And then I am going to be putting some garden stakes, because dahlias do need to be staked. But what I'm going to be working with is T-posts periodically down this row on both sides. And then I'm using what's called Hortanova netting that you stretch over, and it's a plastic netting that I can use from year to year. It was fairly economical. I got a fairly large roll of it through Amazon, and it's 36 inches wide, which will accommodate the bed that I have here. and then I'll just cut the length that I need. But you basically stretch it and put it over your T-posts, and it's a, you know, square grid system. And then as the dahlias and other flowers, because I'll need them for snapdragons and zinnias too, it'll grow up through the Hortonova netting, and that will provide the stability. So there you have it, and I'll show you more about that when I get the stakes in the ground. I've shown this in previous videos. These are some old grapes that we dug up from someone's yard that wanted to get rid of them, and we've transplanted them in our yard. I still need to put some fabric down to cover up the weeds, and I will do that here in the next few days. But we definitely have some new growth happening, and I'll have to do some heavy staking, putting some big 4x4s in the ground, because the vining that will come off of these will be very, very heavy. And so that will be next. But here's another look. We've got some good buds all over this plant. Very excited for that. And then the same variety, we have a lot happening here from the ground as well as budding out here. However, we have this particular transplant that is a different variety of grape than what I was just showing, and we can see a bud forming, which is great. But this particular vine, so far, we've not seen anything. So I'm just gonna let it sit. I will focus on this plant. We'll need to do some staking as well, and you know, we'll just see what happens. But it's great that we're seeing some new growth on these. Here are the sweet pea flowers. If we follow down, they are definitely starting to grow. The vines are getting thicker and starting to wrap around. I see this getting thicker, and there's more clinging to the wire fencing that it's wanting to climb up on, which is the whole purpose of the fencing, is to help, you know, trellis these flowers. I think that we're getting to the point where it's going to start growing pretty quick, and I am starting to see, so like on this particular plant, you can see some new things happening here with some more growth coming out. So I'm hoping to see some flowers here in not too much longer, but very happy with what's going on with the sweet pea flowers. And then as we get a little bit further down, these are the sugar snap peas, and they've actually grown quite a bit since they've been put in the ground, and are at the point where they'll start climbing up the fencing. So really happy about that. I have a couple of these are called Thai soldier beans, and they will climb up the trellis, and I have some other starts. I'm doing a little bit of succession planting with the beans so that I have a longer harvest, but those are doing pretty well. I just put those in the ground, as well as these pickling cucumbers, and I also have more that have been started to have some successions of the pickles as well. This bed here, I just threw down some garden soil over the native dirt that was here. I'm working on amending the original soil, and it'll take me a few years to do that. But what we have here are several different plants that will grow very, very tall. Right here, we've got chocolate lace, so Queen Anne's lace, but it's more of a brown mauve color. These here, I believe, are regular Queen Anne's lace. We've got some Persian cress, some bupleurum, a number of feverfew plants, as well as yarrow. So I'm excited to see what happens with these. This is basically a patch where I wanted to get dirt down and grow things that I didn't want in my long beds. And some of these, like the yarrow and the feverfew, may perennialize, as well as the Queen Anne's lace. So I wanted to keep it out of the long beds, and if it comes back next year, this is the place that they're going to come back.